Welcome back to the fifth installment of the Dental Equipment Repair channel, Dental Equipment Story Time. Today we are continuing our look into the Copeland oil lubricated compressor from Midmark. This is a look into how the system now deals with it's called the purge cycle. The purge cycle is a function of the compressor that removes moisture from the desiccant that's been accumulated, as well as to go ahead and remove pressure from the compressor head. Now, we'll just look up here. We'll start we'll looking through all of these narratives, and then we'll kind of follow it through as each part of the process unfolds. Now it says the pressure switch will open, shutting off the electrical current to the compressor heads and the solenoid purge valve. So this is a mechanical and electrical switch. The pressure switch opens. That makes the compressor head turn off, and it will also, the compressor head unloader valve here opens, and this is the part that drains pressure directly off of the compressor head. Now, this is an important part of the purge cycle because the compressor head, when it's done pressurizing, needs to have the pressure removed from it. The pressure, if it's not unloaded, will cause the compressor to have trouble starting back up. Now, this can be the case if there are certain compressors where certain malfunctions can cause the compressor head to not unload, and this would give a hesitation or stalling when the compressor goes to turn on. So that's the function of that unloader valve. Now, the unloader valve and the solenoid valve here are both connected, and they're both normally open. This unloader valve sometimes has a little filter on it, and as it says, there's a little note down here about it, and it will say that under normal operating conditions, a small amount of moisture and some oil may be under the unloader exhaust muffler. This is not a malfunction. It's evidence that the filter and the desiccant drying system capture the moisture and did not permit it to enter the operatory air supply. So that's something that you might just know that this compressor is a little bit messy. That's one of the downsides to it. So the mechanical valve on the pressure switch opens to unload the compressor heads, and at the same time the unloader solenoid opens, starting the purge cycle. So the purge cycle is air from the purge tank flows back through the gauge cluster and through the metered orifice. So this is the purge tank. This tank filled at the same rate as the storage tank. So both of these tanks are connected through this gauge, and when the compressor was pumping up, they were both filling simultaneously. Now, what you can see here is that there is a check valve, and there are lines that are red and lines that are white. The red lines are pressurized air, and the check valve is a one-way valve where air can flow through it, but it can't flow back the other direction. And that's the reason we have two gauges, purge air and storage air. Now, the storage air and the tank pressure are all going to be at the same potential, which is around 100 pounds of PSI. So in this circuit, we have the storage air gauge. We have a moisture indicator, which is typically blue or pink. It should be blue. That indicates dry air. We have a manual purge valve that isn't used very often, but that's what that is. And then we have a pressure relief valve that opens at 125 psi. This is called a safety valve. And then we have a ball valve that controls air going to our operatory. So this is the pressurized side. Now during the purge cycle, we're just going to follow the arrows here. The purge tank air goes through the purge, basically through this little gauge cluster here, through an orifice that slows down the air. The air then goes through the desiccant tank backwards. Now, the moisture that accumulates right here as it's pumping up the other direction, the moisture is carried out through the normally open solenoid valve that's now open and down into the condensate drain can assembly, which is basically just a bucket. If you don't have this, I highly recommend it because these compressors do have oil lubrication, and there is moisture that's caught here at the coalescing filter and that's produced from the desiccant tank. All this moisture basically blows out, and if you don't attend to this, it can turn into a wet, oily mess. So basically the flow here follows it follows the arrows. So we have the purge tank through the gauge cluster, through the orifice, through the desiccant tank, over here, through the normally open solenoid valve, and then also to the condensate drain can assembly. And then we also have a little bit of air that comes up here and actually down through the coalescing filter to remove that oil and that moisture that accumulates there. Now, the clean, dry air drives the moisture from the desiccant beads and into the condensate drain canister. So the desiccant is really the superstar of this system. The desiccant catches moisture from the ambient air going this way, okay? And then during the purge cycle, it actually blows the moisture out, going the opposite direction, and it naturally channels it. So this is the purge cycle of the Apollo oil lubricated air compressor. This is a pretty important cycle to understand, and this is the reason when your compressor is pressurizing, you hear the compressor noise, you hear the compressor motor running, and you hear all that. But then as soon as it turns off, you hear this air leaking. And it's kind of like this, and it just goes for a while. Just to reiterate, the reason it goes for a while is because there is that orifice, and that air is just slowly coming out here. And because it's leaving the system over the course of a minute or 2 minutes or however long, it's basically has all that time for the air to be moving across those beads and carrying the moisture out of the system. And once the system's over, you can expect to see the storage air is going to be there at 100 psi. Purge air is going to go all the way down to 0. And then our pressure switch is going to be waiting again for that pressure to drop again below 85 psi so that the system can start back up and basically to fill the tank, the purge tank, and get to that point again. And then it's just, again, remember, it's going to be a kind of a cycle that goes up and down. But this is the best I could explain the purge cycle. If you have any questions, please post them down below. And we'll see you the next time for the next installment of the Dental Equipment Storytime. Thank you very much.